Ciao, sono Andrea. Okay, first time in Florence. Okay, welcome in Florence. We are in Piazza Santa Croce, Chiesa di Santa Croce, Santa Croce Square, Church of Santa Croce. Why Santa Croce? Because Santa Croce means Holy Cross. Because in the main altar of the church there is an important relic, a real fragment of the cross of Jesus Christ. From this relic, very small, Santa Croce Church and Santa Croce Square. But Santa Croce is very important even because Santa Croce è la tomba dei grandi italiani, the tomb of the great Italians. Inside, to the right, there is the tomb of Michelangelo, okay? The other side, in front of the tomb of Michelangelo, there is the tomb of Galileo Galilei. Very important, we speak later about Galileo when we are to do physics art here. In the middle, to the right, there is the tomb of Nikola Machiavelli. Nikola Machiavelli is considered to be the father of the political science. He wrote The Prince, this important book translated all over the world about the relationship between king and people. In Italian, because the meaning of the book is to reach your goal you can do everything, no mercy for people. In Italian, when we say Machiavellico, mean a person without mercy for the others. Another important...
I wrote my high school term paper on him.
Yeah, wow, wow. No, ma The Prince, it's a book translated all over the world. It's a very important book. And another important thing about Santa Croce, because Santa Croce is famous for this facade, but this facade, it's neo-Gothic. What mean neo-Gothic? Modern Gothic, new Gothic, was added in the 19th century, because the church is Gothic, but facade 13th century, this facade neo-Gothic. This is Santa Croce before. Okay. There is a curiosity about, because this is not just a slum, this is the tomb, the burial place of the architect of this facade. He did only this facade. Why he is outside? Because he was Jewish. He did a great job in order to respect his religion. This is the tomb of the architect, Niccolò Matas. Di Ancona mean from Ancona. Ancona, it's a city in Marches, Marche. It's a very beautiful region, not famous like Tuscany. It's like this is Tuscany and this is Marches, the other side, to the Adriatic Sea. And a curiosity about Marches is the same region of Raphael. Raphael of the great masters is the only one not Tuscan. Raphael came from Marches, the same region of Niccolò. But another thing about Santa Croce, because Santa Croce is very famous even for calcio storico fiorentino, historical Florentine football. It's like... it's a crazy sport, came from Middle Ages, is without rules, is played by the craziest men in the city, boxer, gym addicted, because people don't care about the ball, people care about the faces, is without rules. The aim of the game, it's like rugby. You have to cross the line with the ball, and it's played by the old 4th district of Florence, Santa Croce. St. John, the district of the baptistry, Santa Maria Novella, the district of the train station, and Santo Spirito, the other side of the river. 4 teams. 20 of June, the first semi-final. 22 of June, the second semi-final. 24 of June, the final. Why 24 of June, the final? Because 24 of June is the day of St. John the Baptist, the patron saint of Florence. And this is Santa Croce, the day of the final. They put sand in the middle. And this is the pitch of the Calcio Storico Fiorentino, okay? And now we can go. This blue line is very important because this is the first circle of walls built by the Romans. Because according to the legend, Florence was created by the Romans 59 BC under Julius Caesar. Those soldiers won the war against Gauls, against France, and Julius Caesar gave them this land. This is the first circle of wall. Santa Croce, where we are now, was the suburbs of Florence. In the Middle Ages, this area was always flooded, unhealthy. The very poor lived here. For that reason, the Franciscans in the 13th century settled in this area in order to help the poor at the beginning of the 13th century. But thanks to the Franciscans, this became a very important place of worship in the city. At the end of the 13th century, was one of the most important neighborhoods of Florence. For the beginning of the medieval suburbs, the religious order were very important, okay? This marked the midfield of historical football, where they start with the first ball. There are a lot in the city center. This is a wine window. Yes, there are a lot because in the Middle Ages it was a very violent place. In order to avoid problem with drunk people, thief, they like pharmacy in the night for safety reason. Before money inside, then wine outside. And in the church there is the river. This area was always flooded. The first slump is the level of the river 1557. The second one, the small one, is the level of the river 1966. This is Duomo Square. Had been damaged, important work inside Santa Croce. It's very important inside, because in the tram, go inside if you can, because it's amazing. In the tram set there are two chapels frescoed by Giotto. Giotto is very important, he's considered the father of the Italian painters. Even for that reason Santa Croce is very important. Why I show you these coats of arms? Because these, and in this shop are still now the original Peruzzi, after 7 centuries. They are still now the Peruzzi family. This was one of the most important family of Florence in the 14th century. The Peruzzi Bank. Look in the coats of arms, pears. Because Peruzzi in Italian mean little pears. You see, now the Peruzzi family is a leather factory till the end, but in the 14th century was everything property of this family. For that reason, the chapel inside Santa Croce frescoed by Giotto is the Peruzzi chapel, because they could afford for the best artist, because the name of the member of this family was Giovanni. The fresco inside the church is to the left the life of St. John the Baptist, to the right the life of St. John the Evangelist. Now Peruzzi is a leather factory, till the end, even the other side is a leather factory. Chinese are crazy for Tuscan leather, full of Chinese every day. Without Chinese they could close tomorrow. This is the house of Michelangelo when he was young. Casa dove Michelangelo Buonarroti, nato a Caprese Casenzino, visse gli anni della sua giovinezza. Santa Croce is the neighborhood of Michelangelo. For that reason the tomb of Michelangelo is inside Santa Croce. And Michelangelo, after this house, he moved inside Medici Palace. I show you Medici Palace at the end of the tour, because Lorenzo the Magnificent, how old are you? Because Lorenzo the Magnificent set up the first school of art in Europe. And when Lorenzo saw the first work of Michelangelo, he adopted Michelangelo inside Medici Palace, and Lorenzo paid for his education. And Michelangelo from here, from the suburbs of Florence, in the house of the richest family in the world. Okay, this is Peruzzi Square. Again, look at the piercing, the coats of arms. But we are not here for the Peruzzi. Stop with the Peruzzi. We are here for this building. Look at this building. You see it's different than the others. It's carved. Look at the shape. Because this was the Roman amphitheater. Okay? Because if I have already the foundation, I don't need to rebuild again. The Florentine, during the centuries, they took advantage of the Roman base and they built the new houses above the amphitheater, okay? This is Florencia, the Roman city, 1st century AD. This street to the right, it was the midfield, like Russell Crowe stuff. Have you seen The Gladiator with Russell Crowe? This was Russell Crowe of Florence. And another thing, because here we can see how the Romans were very clever, because in case of fighting between supporters or riots against the soldiers, it's better to have the amphitheater outside the walls. Like the modern stadium are always outside, because bigger street, better to control the people.
So the whole city was just this area then?
No, this was the amphitheater, 1st century.
Outside.
1st century AD. Now we are outside the Roman walls.
Right.
This is Florence at the end of the 1st century AD, under the Emperor Trajan. Trajan is one of the most famous Roman emperor. Trajan was emperor at the end of the 1st century AD. And the question you did me before, because a lot of people think Florence became rich with art because of the artists, but this is a mistake. Because Florence became rich with textile factories, the finest cloth in Europe for more than 2 centuries. 13th century, 14th century and 15th century, to have a Florentine cloth was like now Armani, Gucci, the best in Europe. They imported the raw wool from England and they processed the whole here in Florence. It's incredible, because in the 13th century, 80,000 people, 30,000 whole workers. It's huge for the time. 15% of the whole market in Europe was processed in Florence. For that reason, the city needed a huge cash flow, and the Florentines started the banking activity. 1252, they coined the first golden florin. one faced the lily. One faced the lily, the emblem of Florence, because Firenze came from Florencia, the Roman name flower. The other, one faced the lily, the other face St. John the Baptist. This was the dollar of the Middle Ages, the most powerful currency for more than 2 centuries, but this was for economic transaction, for the whole coming from Southampton, for the cloth going to Paris. This was not for poor. Poor for bread and wine use like fake silver. This was for the Medici, for the Peruzzi. And they were not noble, they were landholders. But with the banking activity started the fortune of the family, and they ruled the city for 3 centuries. This is the old court law of Florence, the old tribunal of Florence. Why I show you the old tribunal of Florence? Because it's Baroque. When you see this angel flying, is always something Baroque. But we have a few work of Baroque in Florence. For that reason I show you the tribunal. Baroque is more important in Rome, Naples, Sicily, but the old tribunal of Florence is Baroque. Now we have the new one in the suburbs. It's very important, this building. Now this is the Bargello, but Florence is famous all over the world for the Renaissance, the 15th century. But the golden century of Florence was the 13th century. Okay, history is step by step. Because 1252 they coined the first golden florin. 1255 they built the first big town hall, the Bargello. It's a typical medieval architecture, look like a fortress. 1297 they built the new town hall, Palazzo Vecchio, and this was converted in a jail. The name Bargello came from when was a jail, because Bargello was the name of the chief of the police, and still now is Palazzo del Bargello, Bargello's Palace. But now the Bargello is one of the most important museums in the world about sculptures. It's the museum of the Florentine sculpture. Inside there is the David of Donatello. Okay. Why I show you the David of Donatello? Because a lot of people go inside here, because it's a very beautiful museum. Sorry, where is the David? But this is the David. Sorry, but the David... No, because the David of Michelangelo, okay, I show you, very famous, marble, and it's in Accademia, is another museum, okay. Don't go there for Michelangelo, but even the David of Donatello, it's a very important work. Inserted in the street, you see this semicircle? The archaeologists inserted these stripes because this was the Roman watchtower, okay? Now we are at the edge of Florencia, the Roman city. Do you remember I showed you before Peruzzi Square, the amphitheater? Now we are to the Roman walls, okay? But here we can see again how the Florentine took advantage of the Roman base. Because look at the wall of the first cathedral. It's above the Roman wall, okay? This is Florencia, the Roman time, was very small. The border to the left, Palazzo Vecchio. The border to the right, the cathedral. At the time of the Emperor Trajan, 6,000-7,000 people, no more. Now we go inside to the left, is the oldest part of Florence. The beginning of Florence. You see the streets are tiny. Nowadays, for us, this is the medieval district, okay? And look here under the glass. This was the Roman level. Because 20 centuries of history, layer above layer above layer, and the city rised. But this was the Roman level. Look again this semicircle. This was another Roman watchtower, okay? Another question, who is this man? No idea?
Is it Dante?
Good. Dante. Now, okay, we are not sure where Dante was born, but we are sure this is the neighborhood of Dante. And here again, Dante, you see, why Dante is very important for us. You see, this is the nose. Why Dante is very important for us? Because Dante is the father of the modern Italian. Because maybe for English speaker is more an accent, Australia, Scotland. We have dialects. An old man from Milan and an old man from Naples. No deal, it's totally different. But with Dante was born the modern Italian, with the Divine Comedy. Now it's famous for Dan Brown, the Dan Brown Inferno. But Dan Brown, Inferno mean hell. The Divine Comedy is 100 chapters. 33 the hell, 33 the purgatory, and 34 the paradise. From this book came the modern Italian. For that reason, the Florentine dialect is the more comprehensible, is the nearest to the modern Italian, because modern Italian came from Dante's book. And this is Dante by Botticelli. I don't know why this painting is in Switzerland, and and why? Because Botticelli was a huge fan of Dante's book. For that reason, this is Dante depicted by him. Before they built the Bargello was built 1250. This was the building for the political meeting. You see, it's a tower. The name is Torre della Castagna, Tower of the Chestnuts. Why Tower of the Chestnuts? Because they used the chestnuts to vote. From the chestnuts, Tower of the Chestnuts. Florence was New York of the Middle Ages. Towers and bankers. This is Florence in the Middle Ages. You can spot the baptistry in the middle. Florence in the Middle Ages, you see the baptistry in the middle. The city was full of these towers everywhere, but why? Because it was the richest city in the world. The population increased very fast. Like New York, in order to stay inside the peninsula, they go high, like Manhattan, they go up with the building. The Florentine, in order to stay inside the walls, they go up with the towers. It's the same reason. They merged the towers together. The first town hall, the Bargello, 1297, Palazzo Vecchio, the new town hall, and the Bargello was converted in a jail. But Palazzo Vecchio is very important. Again, medieval architecture, look like a fortress, but look like a fortress because it was built in order to protect the government. But Palazzo Vecchio is very important even because was the second house of the Medici family. Okay, you see Cosimo I is this man on the horseback. A lot of people confuse Cosimo I with Cosimo the Elder. But Cosimo the Elder is the grandfather of Lorenzo the Magnificent. He's the main branch of the family. Now I tell you why this is the second house of the Medici family, because the first branch died out. How the first branch died out? Catherine, you see the French flag. Catherine became Catherine de Médicis, the Queen of France, and they sent Caterina to Paris. Ciao ciao. Alessandro, the first male member of the main branch, was killed by his cousin, Lorenzaccio. You see the red crown? Was the first Duke of Florence. His cousin Lorenzaccio from the second branch, he was very jealous and he killed Alessandro. Why the name is Lorenzaccio? Because the real name was Lorenzo. After the merger, Lorenzaccio, because Lorenzaccio means bad Lorenzo, okay? In 1537, the Medici took the power again with Cosimo I supported by the papacy. But there is a difference, because the main branch ruled the city from behind, paying bribes. The second branch, with Cosimo I, he was a dictator. For that reason, he decided to move from Medici Palace inside Palazzo Vecchio. It was a political move in order to say to the Florentine, this was the palace of the government, now is my house, I am the ruler. For that reason, Cosimo I moved inside. And we have even the third house of the Medici family. Why we have the third house of the Medici family? Because the wife of Cosimo I, Leonora di Toledo from Naples, she said this house was too small for her. And she bought with the money of Cosimo Pitti Palace, the third house of the Medici family. Why she wanted Pitti Palace? Because of the garden. Because behind Pitti Palace there is the huge Boboli garden. For that reason, the Medici moved in the third house. Why the name is Pitti? Because Pitti was the first family who lived inside. Was acquired by the Medici in the 16th century, okay? Cosimo I is very important even because we can spot between the palace and the lodge the Uffizi Gallery. Giorgio Vasari di Uffizi Gallery, but the idea of Cosimo was not to build a museum, because Uffizi came from offices. He wanted the offices of the administration of Florence in front of his house. But the first of Cosimo I, Francesco I, he started to collect in sculptures in marbles, the son of Cosimo I, to show these marbles to his friends. For that reason, the Uffizi is considered the oldest museum in the world. But another important thing here in the square, the David of Michelangelo. Of course, this is a copy, because 1875 he decided to move the original inside the Accademia. But the artist of this copy deserve a mention, because this is not a plaster. This is a carved copy. 1911 Luigi Arrighetti did the copy. It's a very good job. But the meaning of the David, why it's outside of the town hall? Because David, the young man without sword, without shield, the victory of the underdogs, he beat the giant in order to say we are a cunning republic. This is the meaning of the David. The other end, you see this bronze. We can go closer. The original is still in situ. This is the original place. Is a bronze, the Perseus of Benvenuto Cellini. But the Perseus of Benvenuto Cellini was commissioned by Cosimo I, when Cosimo was the ruler. And what's the meaning of the Perseus? I'm the ruler, I cut your head. And in the same square we have the Republic and the dictatorship. Because with Cosimo I, art became propaganda for the ruler. This lodge was built in the Middle Ages not for the sculpture, for the political meetings during the rainy day. But during the centuries they decided to put the sculpture under the lodge for reason of conservation. Okay, 1560, Giorgio Vasari built the Uffizi Gallery. In the 19th century, the Florentine artists decided to put those niches with the great Tuscans, not only Florentine. This is the Hall of Fame of the great Tuscans. The first one is Cosimo the Elder. Pater Patriae means the father of the nation. Cosimo the Elder was the political genius of the Medici family. Cosimo the Elder was like Jeff Bezos of the time, the richest man in the world. He invented banking franchising. Because with Cosimo the Elder was the beginning of the check, the letter of credits. Because at the time money was something material. If I give you my letter with my handwriting, when you are in London with the letter you get your money. It's the beginning of the check. And was the grandfather of Lorenzo the Magnificent. But with Lorenzo the Magnificent the Medici Bank failed. Why the Magnificent? For his political skills, because with Lorenzo was a point of balance in Italy. With Lorenzo was a time of prosperity without wars. At the time, 5 players fighting each other: Naples, Rome, Florence, Venice, and Milan. With Lorenzo was a moment without wars. For that reason, the Magnificent. But how the Medici took the power again in the 16th century? Because Lorenzo was very smart. He moved from the banking activity to the clergy. Because at the age of 15, the son of Lorenzo was cardinal. In 1513, the first Medici Pope, Leo X. And when you have the Pope, you don't need the bank anymore. At the time, more than now. Because at the time, to be a Pope was like to be a king. There is a story related with Leo X. He was a Medici, the first Medici Pope. It's incredible. From the potatoes field near in the North Tuscany to the papacy, the Medici. When Luther visited Rome for the first time, was the Pope Leo X. And with Leo X, the Vatican was like Las Vegas, party every day. Was a strange Pope, Leo X. And Luther was shocked. This has nothing to do with the life of Jesus Christ. And when he back in Germany, he started the Reformation. And when Luther visited Rome for the first time, the son of Lorenzo was the Pope. Zeus, I show you before. Benvenuto Cellini. It's 5 centuries in May, 5 centuries since the death of Leonardo, 1519. Next year is 5 centuries since the death of Raphael, 1520 Raphael. In 2021 is 7 centuries since the death of Dante. But one thing about Leonardo, because when I say I'm tour guide in Florence, I work in Florence, when I travel, but even here in Italy, a lot of people ask me why the Mona Lisa is in Paris, in France. Because if you speak with the Italians not interested in art, they always say the fucking French stole the painting. But I have to say it's not true. Was not stolen. This is important because a lot of people think was stolen. Was not stolen the Mona Lisa because Leonardo lived in France. He died in France. The tomb of Leonardo, it's in France. Now there are important celebrations even in Paris about Leonardo. Because before he died, he gave the Mona Lisa as a gift to Francesco I, the King of France. But we know where is the house of Mona Lisa in Florence. The other side of the river, near the church of Santo Spirito, there is the house of Mona Lisa. Yes. Okay. And this is Amerigo Vespucci, the story of Amerigo Vespucci. Because Colombo, he thought Columbus landed in Bahamas, Colombo for us, but he thought he was exploring the outskirts of Asia. Amerigo Vespucci, he landed in Brazil, Salvador de Bahia, but he understood this is not Asia, this is another land. For that reason, in the 18th century, two German geographers, in order to pay homage to this Florentine explorer, they used his Latin name, Americus America, okay? You see the alligator. Why? You are from US, Daniel. Huh? You are from US? India. And you are from Egypt. Yes, I read. And why the alligator? In order to mark this is a new land. The alligator in Salvador de Bahia. In order to mark this is a new land. But Columbus, he thought it was India, okay? And you see on the pillar America, huh? Looking at the stars, because Galileo Galilei, under the second branch of the Medici family, he discovered the satellite of Jupiter. You see the telescope under the arm. The telescope was not invented by Galileo. The telescope was invented in Netherlands. But in Netherlands was a game to watch your friend. Ciao, ciao. Okay. Galileo developed the telescope, and he was the first to use the telescope for the stars, but was invented in Netherlands. Another important thing about Galileo, because he was one of the first with Copernicus and Kepler to say, hey, maybe it's not the sun turning around. But he had to deny this theory because it was against the Bible at the time. He denied this theory about the sun, and yes, he risked his life under the Vatican court law.
Was he good?
No, he denied. He denied to save his life. And he moved forwards in physics. He achieved important discovery even about the gravity. For that reason, there is a curious thing, an important thing. In England, there are the book of Newton, Galileo's book when Newton was a student, with the marginalia of the young Newton. And there is a curiosity about, because 1642 Galileo died, 1642 Newton was born. And Newton is like the second Galileo. He developed the work of Galileo. This is the famous Bazarian Corridor. Bazarian Corridor is an overhead connection between the second and the third house of the Medici family. You see one above the bridge. Not for reason of comfort, but for safety reason, because they were dictator. Was not safe for them to walk at this level. For that reason, Vasari built this overhead connection. But the history of the old bridge, because in 1333 there was a flood, and this flood destroyed all the bridges of Florence. 1345 was built is a medieval bridge, the old bridge. But what's the story? Because at the end of the Second World War, Palazzo Vecchio was the headquarters of the German soldiers. Palazzo Pizzi was the headquarters of the Italian partisan and the Allies. The Germans decided to blow up all the bridges of Florence, but fortunately, at the last minutes, one German general, and there is the slump in his memory on the bridge, he decided to save the bridge. At the last minutes, Gerard Wolf. And thanks to Gerard Wolf, is still now the original bridge. You see these little houses above the bridge? Because it was easy for them put directly the waste of the animals into the river. Now they are goldsmith. It's famous because it's the bridge of the goldsmith. But why? Because of the corridor. Ferdinando I said this place was too stinky for him, and he decided to change the butchers with the goldsmiths. For that reason, still now is the bridge of the goldsmiths. But Ferdinando I was smart, because this was a Medici property, and from the goldsmiths he could ask how much higher rent. 18th century, the leather was very important in the Middle Ages, I told you before, the whole factory. And now the Bazarian Corridor, it's in restoration. Next year is possible to buy one ticket and you can go from the Uffizi Gallery to the Boboli Garden, like Eleonora. I hope next year. When there is a place related with Dante's book, they put the slump with a sentence taken from the Divine Comedy. You see this white slump, you see the small writing below. Dante, Paradise 16. Dante, Paradise 16, 136 is the number of the line. Because Dante, in the 16th chapter of the Paradise, he speaks about this family. You see Torre degli Amidei, this means Amidei's tower. This was the tower of the Amidei family. You see above the slum there is the coats of arms of the Amidei family. It's hard even for me. It's Italian from 7 centuries ago. The Divine Comedy, 3 lines like this and marginalia like this. It's very strong. It's like for English speaker the Canterbury Tales. Because Chaucer, like Dante, was one of the first to use English. I try to read the Divine Comedy in English, but doesn't work. It's like pasta with ketchup, no good. Verse, it's like a chain. In another languages, it's another thing. This is for us the porcellino, the little pig. It's not little pig. It's a wild boar. There is a game. The nose shine for the daily polishing, because there is the tradition. If you touch the nose, it takes good luck. But there is even a game. You have to take a currency. You have to put the currency into the mouth of the pig. If they are trying, if the currency falls into the rates, you back in Florence. If the currency fall outside, you don't back in Florence. This is the game. Don't try. You can just touch the nose if you want. Three Little Pigs. Yes, was inspired by this pig. This is an important stop because this lodge, we wait, because this is an important stop, because this lodge nowadays is for vendors, bags, t-shirts, leather, but this was the lodge of the bankers. The first Medici bank was set up here. At the time, to be a banker was an open-air job. The word bank came from Italian. Banco, table, something to count above. Was an open-air job, with the bankers screaming for the best offer of the day. I give you 100 florin, I wanna back 150 the day of St. John. But this is the key point, why Florence is full of churches. Because was not banking, was usury. And usury was against the Bible. For that reason, the priest started to say to the Florentine bankers, you got well. You got well because you became rich with time. You wanna back more than what you learn, and time is a gift by God. You got well. In the church of Santa Maria Novella there is the chapel of the hell. To the right there are the moneylenders burning, and for them was real, was not just a fresco, was the real hell. And the priest started again to say to the Florentine bankers, you got well, but if you pay for my church, you go to paradise. For that reason the city is full of churches everywhere, because for the Medici, pay for a church was like to buy the tickets for paradise. But with the Medici was the beginning of the modern art, because with the Medici was not only art for churches, was art for my palace, art for my villa. For that reason the Medici are considered the fathers of the modern art. For example, the David of Donatello, it's impossible inside the church. He's a naked boy, from behind look like a girl. The David of Donatello was for the courtyard of Medici Palace.
And he was Jewish.
But not only the David.
He wasn't from the New Testament.
It's even for the Catholic, because David was an ancestor of Jesus Christ, even. But meaning of the David, more than a religious meaning, is because it represents the cunning of the people. Because the story of David, I told you before, not because it's okay, it's even important for religion, but more for the story of David, okay? The English bankrupt is correct, bankrupt. Came from here, the word bankrupt. Why? Because it was an high-risk business. When a bank failed, there was a ceremony. The authorities of Florence came here with a huge hammer. They put the bank in the middle in order to show to the other Florentine, this bank is gone. Don't ask for money. With the hammer, boom! Bankrupt, broken table, okay, banco rotto. From this ceremony came Italian bancarotta, English bankrupt. Or San Michele is an important church, one of the most important of Florence, but it's a strange church. You see, it's square shaped. Why it's square shaped? It's strange for a church, because this was a grain market. When I have tour in the morning, we go inside. Was a grain market. Inside there is a Madonna painted by Bernardo Daddi. He was the best pupil of Giotto. And the Florentine started to think this Madonna performed miracles. And this became a place of worship, crowded of pilgrims every day, too much crowded. And the authorities of Florence decide to move the grain market in another place, and this was converted in a church, because this was a place of work, converted in a place of religion. The old guilds of Florence decide to put his own patron saints of the wall. This is the first one, St. Eligius blacksmith. You see the coats of arms? St. Eligius blacksmith in marble. This is in bronze. Why this is in bronze? Because there was a hierarchy between the guilds. In order to say we are rich, we could afford for bronze, because this was one of the most important guilds. Look at the coats of arms. St. Stephen Hall workers. You see the sheep in the coats of arms. Again bronze. Why? St. Matthew bankers. Look at the coats of arms, coins. This is the coats of arms of the bankers. Why St. Matthew is the patron saint of the bankers? Because St. Matthew in his life was a tax collector. Or San Michele was the scenario of the revolution. This one is a copy, this one, the first one. It's a very important work. It's a copy. The original, it's inside the Bargello. This is the St. George by Donatello, the guilds of the sword makers. But here we can spot the difference, because look at the St. Matthew. St. Matthew is a typical Gothic sculpture. When you see this gentle pose, this fold of the fabrics, this is a Gothic sculpture. St. George 1415 is the first Renaissance sculpture by the great Donatello. Look at the posture. Why Renaissance? Because Renaissance means rebirth. Rebirth of what? Rebirth of the classical culture. But the most important part of this work is this one. This panel below, in Italian we say predella, this is a very important work, because look from here, it's perfect. Look at the arches to the right, the trees behind, the entrance of the grotto. This is St. George killing the dragon. This was for the first time the linear perspective in marble. These techniques invented by Donatello. For the first time people were able to see the 3D in marble. And another important thing about St. George, do you remember the David of Michelangelo? The David of Michelangelo is the time before the battle. There is no head of Goliath at the head of the David of Michelangelo. Is the time before, David waiting for Goliath, and this is the same. The time before the battle, St. George waiting for the dragon, And here we can understand how Donatello was important for Michelangelo. Okay, Piazza della Repubblica is important because this pillar in the middle mark the first two streets built by the Romans. This is the beginning of Florence. The first Roman settlers built these two streets. Before was a cluster of villages. Look at the name of the street, Calimala. Calimala came from Latin, Calle Maior. But Calle Maior, main street, but now is not this one, the main street of Florence, is the other one, the parallel. Why? Because this was the main street when was a pagan city. With the Christianity, the axis change, and now the main street is the street of the cathedral, okay? But when was a pagan city, this was the main street. Piazza San Giovanni, St. John Square. Why St. John? Because of the baptistry, St. John the Baptist. We start with the baptistry because the baptistry is older than the cathedral. Some scholars say the baptistry came from 5th-6th century, was a pagan temple. The baptistry we see now, it was covered in marble by the Christianity in the 12th century. When you see these marbles, green and white, cut in geometric shapes, is a typical Italian style from the 12th century, Romanesque. The architect of the cathedral, Arnolfo di Cambio, he decided to use green and white in order to match with the baptistry, and he added red, but not for the Italian flag, red, green and white, but for the theological virtues, red charity, green hope, white faith. That's the meaning of red, green and white. But like Santa Croce, where we start the tour, this is a neo-Gothic facade, was added in the 19th century. This is the cathedral for the camera. And this facade is neo-Gothic, 19th century. The church is Gothic again. Because Giotto started the work, but what happened? Giotto died at the first level. The second architect, Andrea Pisano, died at the second level. At the end, Francesco Talenti, the third architect, finished the job with the windows. Okay, but it's easy to spot. 3 different styles, 3 different architects. The name is Bell Tower of Giotto because the great Giotto started the work. This neo-Gothic facade. To the door, to the main door, we have Santa Reparata e San Zanobi, the sculptures, 2 patron saints of Florence, 1, 2, 3 and 4 bishops of Florence. The long line is the Madonna with the Child and the 12 apostles. You see 6 and 6, and the Madonna with the Child in the middle. In the triangle, the big circle is God the Father. Under God the Father, this line, because the Florentine decided to put above the apostles, the last line are the Florentine artists. It's easy to spot, not now, but it's easy in the morning. From right to left, you see the beard, 1, 2, 3. You see the beard, the third is Leonardo. And this is a copy, The original is behind the cathedral. There is an amazing museum, I suggest you to go, behind the cathedral, Museo dell'Opera del Duomo, with the original doors of the baptistry. This is The Gates of Paradise by Lorenzo Ghiberti. 27 years of work, gilded bronze. The name is The Gates of Paradise because when Michelangelo saw the door for the first time, Michelangelo said, "These were the gates of paradise," and this became the name of the door. Michelangelo was called by his contemporaries the divine. What Michelangelo said became gospel. Another father of the Renaissance, the great Brunelleschi, the Brunelleschi's dome. Why we say Donatello and Brunelleschi the fathers of the Renaissance? Because they lived in Rome together 4 years. Donatello and Brunelleschi lived in Rome. Donatello studied the Roman sculptures and Brunelleschi studied this one, the Pantheon. This was very important for Brunelleschi. Brunelleschi spent 4 years studying the Pantheon. When he back, he did a miracle, because this is a miracle. 16 years of work, 1420, 1436. There are still mystery about this dome. Why? Because Brunelleschi was very jealous. Before he died, he burned all the plans. There are still mystery about. But what we know, 4 million bricks, checked one by Brunelleschi. And another important thing we know, this is a picture taken from inside. You see the bricks slotted in this way? You see the bricks in this way? In Italian we say spina di pesce. Spina di pesce means herringbone. He slotted the bricks like an herringbone, and each line is self-supporting. This is the great Brunelleschi's dome. But I have friends, architect, engineer. There are still mystery about this dome. Was a miracle for the time. 15th century, a work like this. Brunelleschi is crazy. The dome is going to fall, I'm sure. And before he died, as a revenge, he burned all the plans. Michelangelo moved from Santa Croce inside here because Lorenzo the Magnificent lived here. It's easy to remember how long the Medici lived here, from Cosimo to Cosimo, because it was built by Cosimo the Elder, and do you remember Cosimo the First moved inside the Palazzo Vecchio, the second house of the Medici. This is a very important work by Michelozzo, because this is the first Renaissance palace. When you see a palace in this three level with this double arched window, is always a palace from 15th century. This was the first, 1444. But as I told you before, I have to say the Florentine artists, they were even lucky for 2 reasons. Was the richest city in the world. You could be the best prodigy, but without money you are nothing. And as I told you before, for the quality of the quarries, the white of Carrara, the green of Prato, this is the hardstone, pietra forte we say in Italian, from the quarries of Tuscany. All the most important buildings from Middle Ages till 16th centuries are made with this stone. I work here at the ticket point. If tomorrow you are around, send me a message, I'm inside. For any help, tomorrow I work all day.
And that's the...
This is San Lorenzo, the church of the Medici. Now we are in the middle of the Medici neighborhood, the Medici Palace and the church of the Medici. Look at the crest. This is the famous Medici coats of arms, the famous Medici balls. A lot of balls has been told about the Medici balls, because some say those represent oranges, because the Medici, before the banking activity, they started the trading of oranges from Sicily. Not true. Others say those represent pills, because Medici in Italian mean doctors, medicine, pills. Not true again. The meaning is, do you remember the coats of arms above St. Matthew? Coins. Those represent coins, in order to say we are men who dealt in money. But now the story of San Lorenzo. Because San Lorenzo, it's a very important church for three reasons. The first one, San Lorenzo is the oldest church of Florence. Because look at the map. Do you remember I showed you this map with the Roman walls? San Lorenzo is the oldest church of Florence, came from 4th century. It's easy to spot why, because it's the first church outside the walls. Because in the 4th century was still a pagan city. To be Christian inside the walls was a risk. At the end of this street was the Roman gates, Porta Pretoria. The early Christian in the 4th century settled just outside the walls, but not the San Lorenzo we see now, because the San Lorenzo we see now is the San Lorenzo with the money of Cosimo the Elder, rebuilt by Brunelleschi. Santo Spirito, San Lorenzo and the Dome are the three very important works by Brunelleschi. And the last thing, San Lorenzo is without facade. This is not a style. This is because at the end of the work there is always a lack of money. These sloths are in order to attach the marbles. We have the project of Michelangelo for the facade. Now I show you. They asked Michelangelo for the facade, but what happened? Two members of the Medici family died young. Lorenzo, Duca di Urbino, e Giuliano, Duca di Namur. And the Medici decide to move the money of this facade to the Medici tombs. Behind the cathedral there is an important museum. This is the burial place of the Medici. All the Medici are here. And with the same money we don't have this facade, but we have the Medici tomb made by Michelangelo. Why I decide to do my tour from Santa Croce to San Lorenzo? Because Santa Croce is the neighborhood of Michelangelo when he was young, and San Lorenzo is the place of the funeral of Michelangelo. Why the funeral of Michelangelo was in San Lorenzo? Because the neighborhood of Michelangelo is Santa Croce. But when the body came back from Rome, because Michelangelo died in Rome, when the body came back from Rome in the 16th century, the city was ruled by the Medici. And this is the church of the Medici. Look again at the balls to the doors. And the Medici, as a prestige, wanted the funeral of the greatest in his church. For that reason, the funeral of Michelangelo was here. And Angelo was called, and this is a memory of my tour. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was called by his contemporaries the divine. He was a star. Was not like Van Gogh, famous after
After his death.
after that. Michelangelo was famous in life.
So would he travel with an entourage or?
No, he
No.
was a solitary man.
Okay.
Was like a wolf. Yes, was not a easy person, Michelangelo.
Yeah.
No wife, no few friends, no pupil. We don't have pupil of Michelangelo. For example, Raphael worked with a small company. Michelangelo did everything alone. And thank you, good night. Only one request, thank you, buonanotte, buonanotte. Only one request, write the review.
Okay.
It's important, grazie.